And we're on.
We are. We're absolutely on. Yeah. I'll just have a drink.
You can. Enjoy it.
Hot wings, it's thirsty work. It's good. Good hot
Right,
wings.
I reckon this is going to be 52 minutes, this recording. That's my guess.
All right.
So here we go. Don't change your speed. Just that's my
I
feeling.
will not. I will not. I'll be very happy if I'm in bed before 9. Right.
Okay, then.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the O3C podcast, coming to you from O3C Games. My name is Jonathan Dunn, and I'm joined by my oldest, bestest friend, Christopher Dow.
Sonic the Hedgehog.
And we are chatting about our favourite video games. Not necessarily, though, is it? And we are chatting about... And we are two grown men who bloody love video games.
Yes, we are.
There you go, that'll do. Right, announcements. Before we launch into this week's episode, we want to give you a small nudgeon to visit our Patreon page, please. Patreon.com/O3CGames. If you're a fan of what we're doing and are in a position to support us, we would be unbearably grateful for a small pledge, starting at as little as £4 a month, which is £1 an episode. But higher pledging tiers are available if you are in a position and are so inclined to do that. Oh, God, I shouldn't have drunk that Pepsi so fast. Oh, should have had Pepsi minimum. And not only would you have the immense satisfaction of knowing you are a vital cog in the O3C machine and helping us continue to produce the show, but you will also get a bounty of rewards. Rewards include a dozen full-length exclusive bonus episodes, probably about 100 deleted scenes and outtakes, access to the O3C Discord server where you can chat with us and the other Patreons, and our back catalogue of special guests. And a new perk for this season is...
Pepsi Max.
Full video counterparts to the episodes, which are uncut and ad-free. Which are, just like my penis, uncut and ad-free. If subscribing isn't your bag, then you can also chuck us a one-off donation via PayPal. If you head to our website, o3c.games, and go to the support page, you can find a handy donation button there. If you want to chuck a few pennies our way to say thanks, we would be so grateful of that as well. Whilst you consider those invites, why not share the podcast on your social media platform? Tag a friend who may like it, tag us at O3C Games, and help grow the O3C family.
Top stuff.
There we go. So we're back. We are back.
We're back.
Fresh off the back of our play date, which was lovely. I really enjoyed Clankin's Time Travel Adventure and Boogie Loops. I'm still enjoying them, to be honest. Loving my play date. Loving it. But we're not here to talk about play date this week. This week, we are here to report back on our latest Fortnite challenge. 2 weeks ago, Chris set me the challenge of playing Castle of Illusion, starring Mickey Mouse, and Quackshot, starring Donald of the Duck, which are two 16-bit Disney Mega Drive platform games. And I'm really looking forward to feeding back on those. And I challenged Chris to have a go at classic first-person shooter on the Game Boy Advance, Ecks versus Sever. And
Ecks versus Sever.
I can't wait to hear what you... I can't wait to hear how you got on with that, because, well, we'll find out. But before we do that, let us chat about what we've been playing in this last week. Now, what are you playing? What are you playing?
The live edit.
What are you licking?
All for the Patreons. 50% more penis jokes in there.
Yeah. As promised last week, doesn't make sense. As promised last week, I have continued to plough straight on with Resident Evil 3.
Naturally.
Which, it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun. It's not the most revolutionary of games, certainly not in the series, and it's probably fairly obvious why they decided to take a step back after this game originally and reinvented what the series would become with Resident Evil 4. But that's not to say that this isn't a really, really good game, because it's fantastic. And honestly, I think it does a few things better than Resident Evil 2, to be honest. Like, for starters, figure of fun, Mr. Ecks from last week.
Mr. Hat.
Mr. Hat, the hat-wearing X-Men. He has been massively improved upon in this game in the form of the Nemesis, which obviously it's clearly an evolution of an idea that started with Mr. X, because you've got this constantly evolving just monstrosity chasing you for the entire game, and it's much more frightening. No hat for a start, and
It's all it takes.
It's all it takes. I mean, like, half his face is falling off. He's got big teeth, and but honestly, just losing the hat already 10 times scarier, and he really feels like an unstoppable force that, like, you do just need to forget about everything else you're doing and just fucking run at times. Fucking fireworks.
Oh, that's
Deal
all
with
right.
it. And I mean, yeah, his design is much more interesting. It's less silly. Like I said, it's this evolving design as well, so it gets progressively horrible and bigger and scarier as the game goes on. So he's really, really good. I mentioned briefly last week that the general control of Jill is a lot faster, more immediate, which is really, really good. There are a lot more developed monsters in this game, in addition to like the lumbering police officer and civilian zombies that you have. There's also the start of like parasitic type entities, and there's like horribly mutated sewer creatures. There's scuttling spider type things. There's loads of things to like keep you on edge and really send a shiver up your spine. The best thing that Resident Evil 3 does is actually the way it forms as a companion piece to Resident Evil 2. Now, I can't speak with full authority because I didn't play the second campaign in Resident Evil 2, but from what I've been told and been led to believe, Claire's campaign in Resident Evil 2 doesn't differ massively from Leon's, whereas in Resident Evil 3, the events, they're sort of happening concurrently, or actually, I think, just before the events of Resident Evil 2. And whilst the first couple of hours of the game are played from Jill's perspective, running through infested Raccoon City, you do then switch characters to a chap named Carlos. Who he ends up treading similar ground, like geographically, to Resident Evil 2. And at first, I thought it was a bit lazy because it seemed a bit of a cynical way to reuse assets from the previous game, because you find yourself back in the spooky police station. But then actually the way it plays out is really quite nice, because it is set just before Leon and Claire arrive in Resident Evil 2, and you end up putting things in motion that you will then find in Resident Evil 2, which I'd already found as I played it. So like, even little things like unlocking doors that will then be open when you're playing them in Resident Evil 2, or there's a bit where you blow up a hole in a wall to get through, and that's a section that you have to get through when you're playing as Leon, and you know how that's happened now. And there's really, really fun overlapping action that, like, that's what I hoped would be the style of the second campaign in Resident Evil 2. So you could look at it cynically and say they're just reusing assets and locations, but I actually really enjoyed, the way they did it. It was fun, and you do get to see things from a slightly different perspective. And then the game continues to basically ping pong between these two stories, between Jill and Carlos, which was really, really good fun. Like, you'll be maybe spot things as Carlos when you're playing, and you'll be like, "Oh Christ,
Pepsi Max."
I know, this is a big error. And Carlos and Jill have very different sort of weapon and equipment loadouts as well. So Carlos has got like he's got a machine gun for a start. Jill's got like a grenade launcher, but she's also got like a lockpick as well. So and some other sort of useful items. And there'll be moments when you're playing as Carlos and you'll be like, oh, there's a lock that I know I can lockpick, but I don't have the lockpick because Jill's got the lockpick. So you know that at some point you're going to be playing as Jill and come back to this same area.
Yeah.
And it's really, really good. So you're just
So on that, is there a word in just writing and narrative design generally where the reader or viewer or player has more information than the protagonist or protagonist?
There is, isn't there? There is.
There must be,
is.
because that's basically that example, isn't it? If you can look at the scene and think the person involved in this does not know this answer to a solution, but I do because I've got additional information. It's definitely a word, isn't it?
There
is. What it is. I don't know what it is.
If anybody listening knows what that is, please get in touch at O3C Games, and that will be our homework for the next week. Mainly because I know I won't be able to stop thinking about it until I solve that.
Oh, yeah, things like that really bother me. But I don't even have... It's not like, it's on the tip of my tongue. I do not know the word, but I feel like there is definitely a term for
in the way it's like unreliable narrator or something like that, some sort of literary convention that is... Yeah, definitely. Okay, well... Let's put a pin in that. Let's put a pin in that before we derail this entire episode.
52 minutes.
But the way that the story is sort of jumping, it'll jump slightly back to then show things from Jill's perspective, and then you'll get to a point and maybe then you'll jump slightly back and see how Carlos got to that point. And I think that would have been just like a much better way to structure the Resident Evil 2 remake by like dovetailing and alternating between Leon and Claire's campaign for like one single larger campaign, maybe. I mean, it could be sacrilege to say this, but, as I said before, like I don't have any nostalgia for the originals. So, I like to think this is a fairly sort of objective opinion. Hang on a minute. Like, there are even times, because of how well it sort of overlaps, I almost think, like, actually, the two games could be just one continuous game. It almost feels like Resident Evil 3 is, like, the third act of Resident Evil 2, maybe.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's definitely more action-orientated than Resident Evil 2, and you can see where... I mean, obviously, they went even more so with the action in Resident Evil 5 and 6, and it still feels like Resident Evil 4 is the only one that's really got that spot-on balance between slower survival horror and then some faster action, sort of pacier sections. Although, to be fair, Resident Evil 8 is really, really, really nicely balanced as well. All in all, though, I think I actually had a better time playing 3 than 2. But then also, I'd had my sort of slow survival horror box ticked by Resident Evil 2, so I maybe was a bit happier just having something a bit faster in action.
Run and gun.
Action, but I mean, I must say, as a double bill, incredible gaming. Really, really, really good. I'm a little bit tempted to play 5 and 6. Because I've never given them a proper go.
5, like I've played a couple hours of a lot of Resident Evil games. 4 is the one that obviously I have this perpetual sticking point because I find it too. It's too scary for
isn't
me.
It?
It's
too
too
oppressive.
I don't like it, but 5 is fine. It's meant to be a co-op game, so really you should play it with someone.
Yeah.
And I did the first, like I said, 3 hours maybe in co-op, and I was fine. I wasn't freaked out by that one. I enjoyed it for what it was. It's pretty decent. 6 is a bad game. I think
really?
It is a bad game. And it really doubled down on just being stupid nonsense throughout. Yeah. But, maybe if you just want something quick, it might be fun. But it's maybe. Like within the first 5 minutes, Leon is like leaping out of exploding helicopters and stuff, and it's taken it too far.
Yeah.
It's gone too far.
Yeah. I also have Resident Evil Revelations 2, which I haven't played, and I've got that on the Switch, and I love the first one. The second one's meant to be even better. Yeah. So, I might crack on with that, but I do want to play Mario and Rabbids. So
just shoot the zombies.
I'm really in that. I mean, maybe it's because it's Halloween, but I'm really enjoying Resident Evil. Really enjoying it. But yeah, we'll see. I have started playing another game on my Steam Deck in the meantime, which is Code Vein, which is it's basically billed as like an anime Dark Souls.
Yeah.
And it's very, very similar in its setup. It's developed by or released by Bandai Namco as well, and it runs really, really nicely on the deck. So could have another Souls-like obsession in me that will push Mario and Rabbids even further down the pecking order.
Down the pile.
God knows what's happening with Xenoblade 3. That's a 2023 game for me now. Definitely.
Yeah.
I'm not getting around to that anytime soon. But what have you played?
Well, it's been a few more days of the arcade project continuing.
Yes.
I've skimmed over 2,000 ROMs now for their initial compatibility, and I've got a good workflow on the go, I think, now, to make things about as smooth as possible. The next phase of the mission is to start scraping relevant artwork for the front end I'm using. And I've done the first 50 or so games just as a quick test to make sure things are all in the right place and working properly. And it just looks really tasty. It's
nice.
It's really nice to look at. And it makes such a difference being able to see what you're about to play in terms of just thinking, oh, that looks interesting, I'll give that a go. Or that looks semi-familiar, maybe I saw a screenshot of that once. And it's, I've got this perpetual job of trying to fill these gaps in my knowledge. And this is a really efficient way of doing that, I think, just learning little bits about stuff that otherwise I'd never come across properly. I think my laptop emulation setup was really the first step in having this sort of system, because in that I pulled down box art of everything, but nothing else. And just having that, it really helped to get a better handle on what was in my collection. But this EmuDeck and Emulation Station combo that's available on the Steam Deck is just much more complete. So it's grabbing logos and box arts and screenshots and metadata for 95% of the games in the world. And then if you want to fix the rest of it, it's a bit long-winded, but I kind of know how to do that now. So if I want to sit down with Photoshop for an hour to fill some gaps, I can. And it's looking really good. In terms of actual play, not a great deal. I've played a little bit of Sonic Origins this week. My brother came over and he wanted to see what Sonic 3 was like in widescreen. So I said, well, there you go.
Yeah.
I played a bit of a Picross game called Cupid Nonogram that I found on Steam for about £2. It's Picross. It was something to do on the sofa. It's nice to have. I played half an hour of the pretty average Ubisoft open world racing game, The Crew, that I had years back on the PS4. And again, as with a lot of these games, it was in my Steam library. So let's give it a go.
Yeah.
And then finally, I've played a good few hours, like a solid afternoon's worth of a game called Effie. Now, originally, Effie, as in the girl's name, Effie.
How's it spelled?
EFFIE.
Cool.
So I originally picked up a copy of this game on the Switch because a physical copy had been reduced on Amazon to about 11 quid. And as much as I'm doing pretty much all of my gaming at the moment on the Steam Deck, the Switch is still the place that I've been buying physical games for to satiate my collector mindset. And even as I've sold off, like, no lie, hundreds of PlayStation 4 and Vita games over the last few months, the Switch library is still steadily growing, kind of game by game. But as soon as I put Effie in the Switch, I could tell pretty sharpish that it probably wasn't the best place to play the game, because it was one of those ports where the resolution was pretty low, like kind of sub-Switch resolution. The edges and everything were pretty stair-steppy and jagged. Performance was passable, but if we're being charitable, probably quite variable. And again, like The Crew, hopping over to the Steam Deck, lo and behold, it's in my library from 2 years ago. So apparently, like things like Hot Shot Racing last week, it's very likely a bundle purchase from Humble or some other similar storefront. It would have just arrived in a group like that. And after some settings tweaking, I was in and I was ready to go, and the game was just looking and feeling much better, whether or not I was trying to play it as a handheld game or plugging it into the TV with my Steam Deck dock. Now, I do get the feeling that it's not the best optimized game all in, because it took a decent amount of fiddling to get running properly, kind of comfortably and smoothly. But I think we're locked in now, and a few hours in, things are feeling really nice and smooth. It's
fantastic.
It's basically a 3D platform game, a little bit open worldy in that you can tackle big stages in any order with kind of a pleasant Hyrule Field style hub world in between. There is a story that I largely skipped through whilst I was fiddling with graphic settings, but I seem to be controlling an old guy called Garland, who is gradually discovering, or I guess in the case of the game's lore, rediscovering powers like double jumps and dashes and a range of attacks and stuff like that. And the titular Effie is, I think, your granddaughter in the story. So in between little sections that you achieve, you retell your exploits to her with the narrator doing his best Bastion impression as you play as well, sort of saying Garland couldn't do that right now and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It's not done as well as Bastion. It's not done as frequently as Bastion. But it's clear that that is the influence that they are going with. You collect
he rolled around for a little bit.
That's the classic one, isn't it?
I love that.
Kid wasted his time. So you're collecting things, you're finding treasure chests, you're fighting enemies, you're solving little puzzles. It's all pretty standard stuff, but it is comfortingly assured in its execution. And it is an indie game, sure, but it's one of those push the boat out for an Unreal Engine license indies rather than this is my first Unity project indie. And it means there's kind of a pretty decent level of polish to it all, even if reviews on Steam seem to suggest that it had quite a rocky launch, because there's a lot of people talking about performance and things like that, but it seems quite smooth from what I've played for the 4 or 5 hours I'm in now. Outside of the engine still being quite juicy in terms of how much it seems to tax any hardware, it's a good time. Feels good to play. I don't think it's massively long, so it would be nice to try and beat it before my holiday is up. But as with all games that I play, we'll have to see how I get on. But I like it. I would recommend it. Just maybe not the Switch version, unless that's the only way you have to play it.
I found a website with glossary of narrative terms.
Oh, here we go.
Now, it's difficult to say really, because the closest I think there is here is the omniscient narrator, which is a narrator who knows everything about. Sort of. Well, the example it says is a narrator who knows everything about the existence of the story world, including the internal or psychological states of all characters and the unfolding of events.
I think that's it. I think that's it.
I think that's the closest one.
You're not. It gets difficult because I guess with a game, you are not the narrator per se, but you are the director. You know, in essence, you are an overseer of everything. You are a godlike figure, essentially, like looking over what is happening to these characters, and whether or not you have direct control of them doesn't really matter because you have just a level of understanding that they can't possibly have. Yeah, whether that's in pure kind of like game context where it's understanding, a crate will likely have a goodie in. Or things like that, the kind of game logic and language and stuff of games that we understand, or if it's narratively for them, what is happening to them that they might not be aware of. So I think that is the one. I think that's the one. I think this is time for research time. Better be in the box.
Right, this is certainly the time for Fortnite Challenge Report
theme
jingle. So, it's time to report back. Chris, what did you challenge me to play?
I challenged you to play the Disney double act of Castle of Illusion and Quackshot on the Sega Mega Drive, 2 games I was quite fond of as a young'un. Castle of Illusion more as the Master System version, because that's what I had access to when I was wee. But Quackshot especially, I have a fond memory of having that cartridge for some time and getting a lot of fun out of it.
Well, I played both these games. In fact, I've played a bit more than both these games because I decided to refresh my memory of the Master System version, first of all, because that's the version that I had. I remember lusting after the Mega Drive version. I remember seeing coverage of it on, like, I don't know, Bad Influence or maybe Games Master or something like that, and thinking that was like the epitome of like high-tech cinematic video gaming, which it was at the time, you know. I confess I didn't get that far into playing the Master System version, as it's really not the most enjoyable game to play. I mean, to be honest, the amount of 8-bit platformers that are good to play, you can count on with the fingers of one hand. I mean, obviously you've got like the original Super Mario Brothers, and I mean the 8-bit version of Donkey Kong Country on the Game Boy Color. But Castle of Illusion on the Master System felt like I was playing the Asterix game, which I had and loved, still have. And it's not brilliant game by today's standards, but for how far it pushed the console at the time, Asterix, I think, is the most impressive platform game on that console, even considering like what a good job Sega did with bringing Sonic the Hedgehog to the machine.
Yeah.
And Castle of Illusion, like, it literally starts exactly the same way as Asterix does. It's in the same environment. It's even got the same enemies, which with exactly the same move sets that you have with your character in Asterix. It's really, really weird. It's like play the first level of both those games.
I wonder, like back then, I'm pretty sure Castle of Illusion on both Mega Drive and Master System was developed by Sega. It was an in-house job.
Yeah,
and I wonder if Asterix was as well.
Maybe.
Let's find out. A bit more research time.
Research time.
So Asterix. Developer Sega. Yeah. So
there we go.
It could well be that it had the same team behind it completely.
Yeah. It's there we go. So I was excited to boot up the Mega Drive version on my Steam Deck. Obviously, I was playing all of this stuff on my Steam Deck, and honestly, I mean, well, I was expecting something to be, well, I was expecting the Mega Drive version to be a lot smoother, and for it to feel like a big generational leap better than the Master System version, something akin to, you know, playing one of the Sonic games or Super Mario World or Donkey Kong Country. But to be honest, it never really reaches those, I mean, admittedly lofty comparison points.
Yeah.
Instead, Castle of Illusion, I'd say, sits firmly in the B tier 16-bit platforming games, along with its other Disney brothers and sisters.
Brethren.
You know, his brethren, like Aladdin and The Lion King, whose, I mean, you know, the quality is denoted more by how glossy the pixel art is, and making you feel like you are playing a film more than having a silky smooth, ultra responsive, tight platforming game experience. Oh, I've got a runny nose. Spicy KFC. I can only, as you know, I can only have the spicy coating stuff because the normal
has
one of the
buttermilk or something in it.
Yeah, it's one of the 11 Colonel's 11 secrets is
lactose.
Apparently, yeah. So I was checking on the monitor. Nora's having a little cough and a wiggle. Love her. Can't believe she's going to be 2 in a couple of weeks.
Bared up quick, isn't it?
Mm. I think she's all right. She's just having a little wiggle. What's she doing? Sorry. She's so lovely. Just want to wait for her to get settled. Sec. Because Sammy's not here tonight, so.
Yeah. I can hear her faintly in there.
Yeah. Oops. Oh, I think she's okay. She's absolutely fine. She's just, she's so good at settling herself as well. I think she's good. All right. Okay. Right, let's carry on, shall we?
Yes.
But the main thing that I had to get used to is where Mickey ends up being on the screen to dictate scrolling.
Yeah.
And you'd expect it to be on the left-hand side, or maybe like slap bang in the middle if you're going to be doing lots of back and forthing. but you have to be alarmingly far forward for the screen to follow you, which means that a lot of the platforming elements can feel really quite unfair, especially with like repeatedly spawning enemies, which also do that with very little consistency. But I mean, it's decent enough. There were a couple of levels that did sort of trigger a childhood memory of longing for this game. Notably, there's a level where you're going along the shelves of a house, which is really, really nice. I love that sort of sense of scale in games.
Yeah.
But there's also there's a lot of times when the game just seems deliberately confusing, which is a sign of its time, I know. But then it's also, I thought maybe it was possible that like the director saw the design of some of the levels and then just went, you know what? Why don't we call this game Castle of Illusion? And then people will think that we did this on purpose. Because, you know, there are things like puzzles with no signposting, sort of trial and error, things you have to just like brute force your way around, which, like I said, is not uncommon. It's not uncommon in older games where, you know, they are that bit more obtuse, knowing that the player will only have that game to play. And if they did know all the answers, the game would be about 10 minutes long. To be fair to it, to be fair to it, though, it has actually got a bit of additional replay value because it actually has difficulty modes, which you don't really see in those games. I don't know if Aladdin or like those ones did. I don't remember them having that. But like Castle of Illusion has a practice mode, which is really strange, where it basically gives you like a dumbed down version of like the first level of each of the worlds. So you can just like get a sense of it. Then you've got normal, which is playing through the game. You know, you've got like 3 levels and a boss per world, and there's about 4 or 5 worlds, I think. And then there's a hard mode, which is quite cool. Obviously, I'm not going to do that. But to be fair, like the game was, you know, it was challenging enough, which again, I think is a bit more down to its age and slightly clunky controls, certainly for the boss fights. But it does still have a lot of charm to it. And I think that it's strange given how recognisable and familiar Mickey Mouse is as a character. The amount of content that, I mean, certainly I've seen him in is ridiculously low. Like, I've seen Steamboat Willie, I've seen his bit in Fantasia, and that's really it, outside of playing Castle of Illusion, and also Epic Mickey, which I know was meant to be good, but I never played it.
Yeah.
I've never played Kingdom Hearts. I don't know if Mickey Mouse is a big player in that. Well, there we go.
He's a big part of
that. But for me, it felt quite novel to spend some time with Mickey, so that was quite nice. That was quite nice. The next thing I did was have a little look at the remake of the game, which came out in 2014, I think.
Something like that, yeah.
And it's a really, really nice game, I must say. They've done a fantastic job. I think I definitely appreciated it more playing it directly comparing it to my playthrough of the original. Like, I think if I didn't have that knowledge, then I think it would still be a pretty solid platform game, but not on the level of, say, you know, like a Nintendo first-party platformer. But it's really, really cool to see like what elements of the original game they've decided to retain, which ones they've decided to evolve, which ideas they've just decided to jettison entirely because they were shit. But like the key control, hang on. But the key central tone and atmosphere that made the original special and still like triggers that childhood sense of wonder in me, even though, you know, I only saw it as a kid, not play it. That's still there, and it's really beautifully realised in a modern context. It reminds me a little bit of the Pokemon Let's Go games, which totally update the original Pokemon Red and Blue games on the Switch. But playing those felt like how those first games felt in my memory, because my childhood memory of those original Pokemon games filled in all the colours and added a lot more pixels than were actually there in reality. Like, it's definitely the right way to do a remake. I think an intelligent remake that really challenges what works and what doesn't. You know, sometimes a game needs a bit more modernising than others. Something like Wonder Boy Dragon's Trap, that remake barely needed anything doing, just a slightly refined menu system. The paint job on top of it was a lovely bonus. But the game itself holds up unbelievably well. I did try a while back. I tried the DuckTales remastered game.
Yeah.
And that felt like it needed a lot more modernizing. Despite like a really lovely paint job, it still played like a dated game. I never want to think about the Alex kids in Miracle World original or its tawdry remake ever again. So I'll just focus on the good remakes that get it right. Castle of Illusion can certainly go in that camp, along with like Black Mesa, Pokemon Let's Go,
Resident Evil 2.
Resident Evil 2, well, I don't know. I can't say because I didn't play the originals really. But hopefully that's what Resident Evil 4 is going to be, and Dead Space as well. I think it's shaping up to be a really, really, really good remake. So, crack shot.
Yeah. Ducks.
Good fun. Ducks are funny.
And he wears a hat.
He does wear a hat. It's a very funny game. And plungers make you think of poo.
They do.
Yeah. Weirdly enough, the platforming, the actual platforming action in the game felt better than Castle of Illusion. There's a few more movement mechanics available, namely being able to slide on the floor, which I quite liked. It gave a lot more fluidity to how it all felt. Your central weapon is your plunger gun. It can be used to stun enemies. You can upgrade it, and then you can shoot walls and use it as little platforms. Later on, you can upgrade it again and shoot birds and hold on to it to fly. It's really annoying that you can't kill enemies with your plunger gun because
he's a pacifist.
He is a pacifist, but he has got a popcorn gun and a bubble gun that do kill enemies. Oh,
that's true, actually, yeah. So, no, he's not a pacifist.
He's certainly not. No, he's a very angry duck.
Yeah.
But you have to go in and out of menus to change your weapon, and it's the popcorn and bubble gun also have exhaustible ammo that isn't necessarily readily available. So it always felt just a little bit frustrating. I always felt under-equipped for what the game was asking me to do. There are parts of the game where you do need actual ammo to like clear blocks and stuff, and to be fair, the game that puts like ammo drops and things like that. But it would have been nice to have had those different weapon options be a bit more integrated. I didn't even know you could fire your plunger gun up for like all of the game until you have to fire your green plunger onto the underside of a bird.
Yeah.
Wish I'd known that. Wish I'd known that you could fire up. That would have made some of the boss fights a lot easier. But there we go. There's a fun mechanic in the game revolving around Donald Duck's temper, where if your temper rises high enough, you go into this like unstoppable rampage and you just defeat anything in your path at great speed. It's really, really fun. It's like akin to getting like a superstar or something like that in Mario. But it's literally, there's about 2 places in the game where you use it, and it's a bit of a shame because that's really fun, and it'd be nice if there was a bit more of that. Like I think the best way of describing the game is that it is a whole bunch of incredible ideas that are ahead of its time.
Yeah.
But absolutely not fully realised in this form. Like this vague Metroidvania-esqueness is definitely a generous way of describing it. The levels work as standalone levels, and when you get to a roadblock, you'll plant a flag, and you can go to another level to get something to overcome the previous roadblock, and then you can basically just walk back to your flag to continue that level. A couple of the things you need are like movement mechanic based, around, like I said, like upgrading your plunger gun to get steps and hanging things. So, I mean, I don't know, I wouldn't really call it a Metroidvania. It's more elements of point and click games than anything else, I think. Go through this area to get a key to get through a previous area, etc., that sort of thing. Although the location hopping is quite fun, because it does give each level a really distinct, different flavour and tone, even if the enemies are largely exactly the same throughout. But it's nice to have that sort of degree of flexibility over what order you do the levels in, even though you do have to do them in a certain order to actually get through it. So it sometimes can be a bit frustrating because you think, I'm going to play through this level. Am I going to get to a roadblock and then have to do another one anyway, and then have to play through a level, blah, 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 blah. But it's certainly it's certainly a really interesting comparison point to Castle of Illusion, as are, I think, the other Disney platformers of that era. Like I said, Aladdin and The Lion King, which are, I think, the only two that I've played. They do have this degree of gloss in the level of quality of the sprite design, the animation, certainly the background art, but, you know, they really do look very, very bright and colourful. And at the time, it would have felt akin to playing your favourite movie or Saturday morning cartoon.
Yeah.
Gameplay-wise, it's interesting that Disney always were trying to like push the boundaries with what they were trying. They weren't just resting on their laurels and banking on their famous characters. Like Quackshot is certainly more of an example of their gameplay design ambitions than Castle of Illusion. And I think both hold up decently enough today, despite showing their age in terms of their design and mechanics. But like I said at the start, it's also really clear that these Disney games are absolute B tier compared to Nintendo and Sega's first-party platforms at the time. I think that the Donkey Kong Country games, certainly Sonic 3 and Knuckles, are the apex of that genre for that generation. To be honest, actually, any generation that's come since. Like,
they're very strong.
I love the SNES Mario games, even like the All-Stars remakes and Super Mario World. They still feel as good to play as any other 2D platform game. You know, the fact that I got so much value out of Super Mario Maker is a testament to those the agelessness of the Mario games. I think like it's the big risk of emulation, and one of the potential perils of revisiting older games is that they might not hold up as well as you remember them. But then it also does give you a lot more respect for the games that do. And it's also really, really nice to have the opportunity to see and play games that were building blocks in the evolution of video games as a whole. And I think I really do admire the ambition of these games and what they were trying to do. Not going to play them again, but I'm really, really glad to have done that. I'm also enjoying being set games that I can complete within an hour. So well done to you, Chris.
Is this on to me now?
Anything to agree with or disagree with?
I think with any old games, like I've been dipping in and out of kind of emulation libraries for quite a long time now. Like it's always been something I've been quite interested in, partly because I've got this, like I mentioned earlier, desire to know about every game that's ever existed for anything.
Literally. But
also it's in a similar way, I guess, that you can look back at, say, like early cinema, and films are much slower, or films have a lot less movement just because of the technical limitations of not being able to lug a camera around and everything else. Yeah. There's things you can kind of watch a film and think, okay, this is not like a film I'd go and see at the cinema now. It's not a film that would be made now, but I can sort of appreciate the problems they had at the time, how they tried to overcome that, how certain directors or certain kind of visionaries within that industry were thinking, well, what can we do to push this forwards? And that's what I find most interesting, I think, about visiting old games, that you do have some that are just 10 a penny, platforms are popular, so let's make a platformer. But then you do have these examples where it's like, well, what happens if we just tweaked it a little bit, just gave like a player a bit more kind of agency over where we're going to go next? Or, using weaponry in a slightly different way, or using power-ups in a different way, or whatever it might be. And they don't always work out, and they're not always things that you're going to go, oh, that was amazing, and I can't wait to play that again. But I think it does just help fill gaps sometimes to help track that sort of, garden path that started with something and ended with something else. There's a lot of stones along the way. And sometimes I think it's easy to forget how refined things are in 2022, or whenever you might be listening to this, versus how games were in the early 90s or late 80s, essentially, for some of these. It's been a long time. It's been a very fast-moving industry, but a long time at the same time.
So over to you, Chris. I set you the challenge of playing Ecks versus Sever, which is a first-person shoot-'em-up game on the Game Boy Advance. I had it back on my Game Boy Advance. I bought it as soon as I knew that it existed, because I couldn't believe that I was going to have a first-person shoot 'em up on a handheld console. And I played through. I remember playing through the whole game several times on my unlit Game Boy Advance screen, and having a great time. And I'm really intrigued to see how you think it one, how it holds up today, and two, sort of how it compares to other other ambitious ports of first-person games on sort of lower-powered hardware.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned when this was set that my overriding memory of Ecks vs. Sever is watching you play it on that unlit Game Boy Advance screen in our form room nearly 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And I had dipped into this game once or twice via emulation over the years, because it's one of those games that's pretty good at taxing an emulation setup, because it's quite heavy. It's doing a lot of heavy lifting, essentially, with this kind of version of a 3D renderer that it's pumping out. And less accurate emulators often struggle with the way it handles 3D, or some have like iffy audio. Like I remember playing it at some stage on the Vita, whichever emulator that was running, and it had a really off-putting buzz that just persisted throughout playing. And I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm not committing time to this. This is too annoying. Yeah. But playing it in 2022 through on the Steam Deck, this is pretty much perfect emulation of the game that you played as an adolescent, except now it's on a bigger, brighter screen. So it's lovely.
Yeah.
Now, Ecks vs. Sever was a big deal on the GBA because it was one of the first games that attempted some sort of 3D engine on the hardware. The GBA being a handheld that was not that much more powerful than a Super Nintendo, really. Whilst the SNES did have a port of Doom, which was impressive in itself, but kind of unplayable. To pull that feat off at all, it needed extra chips inside the cartridge, like it used one of the Super FX chips, whereas Ecks vs. Sever is just running from stock hardware, no modification. This is just the Game Boy Advance pumping this out. I think Doom is quite a good comparison point, because it also had a Game Boy Advance release about a month before Ecks vs. Sever. And
did it?
It did, yeah. And both games use this sort of 3D rendered environments with scaling sprites for enemies and pickups and everything else. And if anyone's struggling to visualize it, it's a style that we're familiar if you've ever played a 90s first-person shooter on a computer, or anything else really, because they all use that same format. So Duke Nukem is rendered in that way. Exhumed is rendered in that way. They all did the same thing, kind of 3D environments and 2D things in it that just got bigger or smaller as you were closer and further away. The main difference, I guess, here between Doom and Ecks vs. Sever is that Doom was obviously a port of an existing product, so you kind of knew what you were expecting. And Ecks vs. Sever was entirely its own thing. At the time, it was being developed as a tie-in to a film that, through delays, wouldn't launch until about a year after the game.
Yeah.
A delay that was so long, in fact, that the original game bears no resemblance to the film's plot. And a sequel game called Ecks vs. Sever Ballistic was released as a much more accurate tie-in alongside the eventual film's cinematic release. So it's got a bit of interesting history to it. The plot and dressing is all pretty much irrelevant, though, because it just acts as the excuse for why you are either playing as Ecks or Sever in its game world, just to make you run around warehouses and offices and back streets and government buildings to shoot some bad slags with a variety of weapons. And that's kind of it. And you know what? The game is really, really good.
Yay!
It's really good. It took me a while to relearn the control scheme, first and foremost.
Yeah.
The D-pad moves you forwards and backwards. You can turn left and right. And then, as standard L and R, the shoulder buttons allow you to strafe in their respective directions. If you hold both shoulder buttons, you can duck, which is really important when you're trying to dodge enemy fire or trying to utilize cover to avoid taking damage. And then the face buttons fire your weapon or interact with objects. And then you can use select to change your weapon. So it's a pretty simple setup, but it does take a little bit of time to get used to. Within a level or two, I felt pretty comfortable. It's not that dissimilar to the setups employed by other first-person games of the era on platforms without dual sticks. So, games on the PlayStation 1 or certainly early in the PS1's life before the DualShock existed, on the Saturn, on the N64, on the Dreamcast, even the PSP, we've been really spoiled by years now of doubled analog sticks. But back then, that was just how it was, and it was perfectly serviceable, really.
Yeah.
Stage layouts are really nicely designed in that they seem to be designed to feel like real contiguous spaces. So you're not suddenly warped from place to place. There's a genuine feeling of interconnectedness in each stage, but also in stage 2 stage. As you finish one and move to another, there's a clear sort of byline of how you've got there. And similar to something I said about GoldenEye about a billion years ago on this show, there's often these rooms and hallways that are included just to make places feel a bit more real, as opposed to every piece of square footage serving just to push you from A to B, like Call of Duty does even today in a lot of its campaign stuff. Like, you will find dead-end alleyways sometimes. You will find unlocked rooms that have nothing much in them. They're just there because that's how a real building would be, and that's how spaces are often designed. And I really like that. It just feels a bit more honest, like I'm actually in a place. Guns feel pretty good as well. You've got some weighty shotguns, you've got assault rifles, you've got grenade launchers, and even on a couple stages, a sniper rifle.
Yes,
and
so good.
The implementation, as far as I can tell, trying to pick apart how this is done, I think it essentially just roots your character in place and then lets you take control of a cursor with a coloured filter over the screen that you're then walking around. So I think that's how it would work, like trying to kind of balance how that would make sense. That then lets you obviously zoom in. There's problems sometimes when you can kind of almost see through corners because it's struggling with that. But it just feels really clever. It just feels really clever. I really appreciate kind of sometimes when you can see the seams of these kind of old tricks. Because, again, it's that idea of working with the hardware and saying, okay, well, we can't do this, really. We're not actually zooming into a space, so how can we make that work? And if that is a case of just saying, well, let's take an orange piece of paper and just drive it round, that's fine, because it works. It works enough to kind of sell the idea. One thing I'm not so keen on is the way that enemies are placed in stages. Mm-hmm. And I'm just coming to the end of the Ecks campaign now. So I think I'm on, like, mission 11.
Okay, yeah.
And within the 10 stages I've beaten so far, and within the 10 stages I've beaten so far, it is remarkable how many stages start with you spawned directly in front of an enemy who will shoot you on load if you don't rapidly get out of the way. Yeah. And you can't know that. So presumably, the first time you play, because that's what was happening to me, I'd start the stage, die immediately, and then be like, well, I guess I have to shoot or move, don't I? But that would really piss me off, especially as a kid. To then have to be like, well, I guess I'll load it and try it again then, shall I? Sort of that sort of indignant way of reapproaching a level. In levels themselves too, you'll often say ride an elevator up to an upper floor and have no way of knowing firstly which side the lift is going to open because we're talking about very low textures on the GBA.
That's also very true to real life though. I've done that before.
A lot of hospitals,
yeah.
Hang on, wait, my laptop's not charging. Why is it not charging? Why is it not charging? It's plugged in. Why is this not working? No. Did we catch it? Hello again. Right, this is not a power cut issue this time. This is plugged in at the wall, and it's decided we're not giving you any power today. So
brilliant.
It now says it is. Hang on, it is now charging again. Okay, we should be okay. The problem is because it's a big gaming laptop. It's like if it's not got power, it lasts an hour.
Yeah,
like it doesn't have any oomph. So I'm not even checking the taskbar to see I'm running out of juice. And then suddenly get a message saying, you're shutting down in 10 seconds. And it's like, come on, mate, give me a chance. Right, we should be okay. Let me try and work out where we were. More deleted content. Right, so where did we get to on this elevator talk?
You wouldn't know which way they'd open because the text was shit.
Did you finish what you were saying about that? Maybe.
Yeah, probably.
Okay. So when it does open, you immediately get massacred by 3 dudes with shotguns that are impossible to deal with unless you know they're going to be there. Mm-hmm. And because there's no kind of checkpointing in a level, other than kind of the passwords you get at the start of the stage, it can be really, really annoying if you're trying to play it legitimately, get into a stage where you're like, oh, a new area, and then just immediately getting blammoed. Yeah. Now, I've been a good boy in that I haven't used save states at all in this game other than to just save my level progress. Because I don't want to be writing down passwords because I'm not about password saving in the year of our Lord 2022. That's not for me.
So you are better than that. You are.
But by golly, I have been tempted to use save states during some of these gotcha encounters.
Yeah.
Because I may have only beaten, say, 10 stages, but RetroArch says I've played the game for over 4 hours. So you can do the maths to work out the average of how long some of these later stages have taken.
Yeah, 6 hours each.
Now, I don't know if I'll have the stamina to forge on to finish the whole game because it is really tough. But I have really enjoyed my time with it. And I'll likely keep it set as a favourite in my emulator setup so it's easy to return to if the mood takes me.
Yeah.
But there's just so many games to play, aren't there? There's just a lot of games to play.
There is.
I seem to recall, I don't remember you finishing this back in the day. You may know otherwise.
Almost certainly not.
But generally that was something almost unheard of for teenage done. Because you were the one who finished, say, Mario Kart Super Circuit 1 billion times.
Yeah.
And you finished Mario 64 on the DS with 150 stars on every save file multiple times.
Yeah.
So that kind of, really, really pushing and squeezing a game for everything that it had. It was always shocking to me that Ecks vs. Sever was one that I'm pretty sure you dropped. I don't think you got through everything. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I don't have a memory of doing that.
Yeah.
I think I would remember. There are a few games I can remember as a kid that I never completed.
Yeah.
Like Cannon Fodder on the Game Boy Color.
Ridiculously hard.
Unfair.
It was.
Totally
Good
unfair.
game, though. Good game.
Oh, yeah. Very, very good. War really has never been so much fun.
It hasn't. It was... Well, it's anti-war, isn't it? Because in that game, you get the little poppy commemoration after every mission, and you see all the little gravestones on Boot Hill. It's a good game. Anyway, this isn't about Cannon Fodder.
Yeah,
it's not about Cannon Fodder. So, back to it. Ecks vs. Sever, 2 thumbs up.
Fantastic.
I've only ever played the first stage of the sequel / actual movie tie-in. Maybe that's even better. Don't know. I remember it being a bit more involved in terms of sort of the objectives I had to do or the places I had to move around. But again, I'm basing this on literally one level, so I can't say that much about it. But at some stage, maybe I'll pop in, play a bit more, and let people know about that as well.
Fantastic. Off the top of your head, do you know if there are any first-person games on the Game Boy Advance where you can look up or down?
Ooh, let's have a
Because for some reason, in the back of my mind, I had it as a fact that the Ecks vs. Sever sequel, you could do that, even though I know you can't.
Yeah.
And because I played a bit of it as well.
Yeah.
I played a bit of Ecks vs. Sever this last week just to refresh my memory of it, and I do still really, really like it.
Yeah,
I did play the first level or so of the sequel, and there aren't any more movement mechanics, but there aren't any more buttons.
This is it. Now, I would say that there probably aren't any, at least in like a first-person shooter style that you can look up and down, because the way that most of these engines worked is even the original Doom on the PC, if a monster was higher than you, if you were in line with it, you would hit it if you shot.
Okay.
So there's something about the way that game renders 3D spaces. It's not actually higher. It's like, it's a big visual trick that how things are put together. So it's essentially saying you've just got a direct line of sight, and that's good enough.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until later ports of Doom that obviously now we have full control to aim where you like, shoot where you like.
Yeah. Well, there we go. It's even more exciting. Well, we've now reached an even more exciting part of the episode, which is laying down the next challenge.
The Smackdown.
So, Chris, do you want to find out what you're going to be playing for the next couple of weeks?
Come on then.
Okay.
Rubbing my hands together.
I would like you to play a really, really good little indie game
Right.
that I discovered in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
It made it onto my honourable mentions, actually, for the amendment season, and that is Moe Astray.
Oh, okay.
It's a gorgeous 2D side-scrolling action platformer. It's got a lot of puzzle elements in it, as well as a hint of Metroidvania-ness to it. I think I picked it up on the back of a really, really good, I think it was like a 9 out of 10 review on Nintendo Life. But I was really taken by surprise at its quality. I had a fantastic time playing it. I know it's available on Steam as well these days too, so I guess it'll be up to you if you play it on the deck or on the Switch. I'm not sure if it's had a physical release on the Switch.
Not. I would know if it had.
Yeah, so it may already be in your collection. It may be in your Steam library already.
That's possible.
I really hope you enjoy it.
I will get it downloading. I'll give it a go. Now for you, ever so slight deviation, I'm going to give you a choice of 2 to pick from because they are similar in a way. So I've gone for the same kind of train of thought, but I want you to have the deciding vote as to what you would like to try. So both are pretty
cheap.
You
know I'm 100%ing both these games.
Both are pretty cheap. Both are on Steam or Switch or PlayStation, whatever you want to play them. So you've got plenty of options. And both are 3D platformers that take pretty heavy influence from the collectathons of the N64 and early sort of PS2 era. So you were either going to play, or play both, a game called Poi that I beat a few years ago now, that I really enjoyed on the Switch, or a game called Unbox Newbie's Adventure. Now, for these two games, Poi is a little bit more upfront with his inspirations. So you're leaping in and out of stages, very Mario 64 style, to complete different objectives. Unbox is set across wider stages and bases all its puzzles and goals more on the unique challenges that come from getting around as a cuboid cardboard box. So it's got a good sense of humour to it.
What's box called, sorry?
Unbox. Yeah. Newbie's
Adventure there.
Newbie's Adventure. Like I said, I finished Poi and I had a really good time with it a couple of years back. I've quite recently played the first hour or so of Unbox. I just never mentioned it on the show. But enough to see that it seems a pretty decent time, I'd say. So the choice is yours.
Do I have to choose now?
You do not. I say the choice is yours to make at a time of your choosing prior to our next Fortnite Challenge recording.
Fantastic. I've had just a very, very quick Google, and I really like the look of both of them. And you know I'm going to play both if I
can. I need to start setting you just more work. I'll be like, this week you're playing a 200-hour RPG, and I will not accept anything less than a 200-hour save file as proof and evidence that you enjoyed it a commensurate amount.
Yeah, that's fair enough. So there we go. That was our what was it? So there we go. That was our Fortnite Challenge report, reporting back on Cost of Illusion and Quackshot, starring Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck respectively, and
Ecks versus Sever.
I hope you've enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we've enjoyed listening to each other. Next week, we will be continuing our Playdate playthrough, and we're going to be reporting back on Lost Your Marbles and Pick Pack Pup. Really looking forward to chatting to you about those games. If you're enjoying what we're doing, please do share the podcast on your social media platforms. You can also engage with us on ours. We are at O3C Games on everything. Check out our Patreon page if you fancy getting more involved and supporting us, patreon.com/O3C Games, or visit our support page on our website, o3c.games. You can reach out to us individually as well. I'm on Twitter at Jonathan Dunn.
I am at Chaz_Hodges.
Have yourselves a wonderful week, and we will see you same time next week for a play date.
Yep.
There we go. Hour and 2 minutes.